Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to the History of the Dice Tower. Sort of a presumptuous series of sorts where I talk about kind of what has gone on in the Dice Tower. I started and kind of paused this series in 2018 and 2019, taking a look at my birth, all the way up to the year 2017. Well, now that it's 2023, I figured, let's do the next 5 years. Now, my memory is not very good, and it's going to get worse as time goes by. But looking at pictures, threads, videos, and just basically remembering, I can remember a lot of stuff that happened. So I'm going to go over, in this particular video, I'm going to be going over the year 2018. I'm going to try to be as honest and forward as I can, keeping some things in confidence because they just are. But I will tell you maybe a little bit about what happened behind the scenes. So we're going to talk here about what happened in the year 2018. So in 2018, pretty big year for the Dice Tower, as is, I'm going to probably say, every year, going forth from this one. One thing that happened at the very beginning of the year is I was like, you know what? I think I'm done designing games. I had another game that I put together. I shopped it around with a lot of people under an assumed name. I was like, I'm showing this video off on behalf of someone else. And I think it was an okay game. One publisher took it, and I won't mention him because that publisher still exists, and kept my prototype and never gave it back to me. So rather than recreate the whole thing or do anything with that, I was like, this just isn't going to happen, I guess. And it wasn't even that great of a game. I still have some concepts, some ideas of that game, and maybe I'll put it together someday. But I felt like I really like what I'm doing at the Dice Tower, so designing is out. In 2018, we moved back to Kickstarter. In 2017, we had tried Indiegogo, which was a very scary experiment. It's still something that, we're asked to do. BackerKit and GameFound, hey, do you want to run projects in us? But it's hard to leave Kickstarter. Indiegogo did okay, but going back to Kickstarter worked, and so we moved our Kickstarter, which was successful in 2018. We moved into our new studio. There was a whole lot of drama in 2017 about going to one studio and the HOA not wanting us there, so we moved out. We found his house, and in 2018, we fully moved in. I did a video. You can go back and look at a tour of the Dice Tower Studios. Very different than where we are and what we have now. Over the course of the year, we started adding. We've always had different reviewers show up. Brian Drake started reviewing games for us. He's a much bigger part of the channel now. I started doing a Designer's Best series. Every year I think of some sort of series I can do maybe over the course of the year, and I've done the best of publishers, the best games from each letter of the alphabet, things like that. This year I did the Designer's Best. I also did a video which blew my mind how popular it was on short game reviews. I think I did 11 short game reviews, and it got like 70,000 views, and I was like, whoa, that was a little easier than doing those reviews, one by one, and it got those games way more views than it would have normally. I like that concept because one of the things about being a reviewer is it's tough to, to go into great depth on games you really don't like, and so this was a nice way to do that and also have more people watch it. I did the History of the Dice Tower. Reviews is very meta here as we talk about that. So a lot of things happened in 2018 and 2019. And so there's kind of a series of events that changed how we did things and where our focus was from that point. And this is going to lead up into, obviously we all know what happened in the year 2020 with the pandemic. But before that, in 2018, I decided I'm going to grow the Dice Tower. I'm going to make the Dice Tower something bigger. You can take something, like when I took the Dice Tower, I just did videos. I reviewed things. When I brought Z on board and Sam on board, I was like, okay, good. We got Derek on board. I'm like, you know what? This is good. We don't need to grow. We don't need to get bigger. This is good. And someone convinced me, hey, if you're not growing, you're not growing. And I thought, I do want to grow. I do want to make things bigger. So there was a little bit of a series of events that happened here. So we did our 30-hour marathon, and we were doing that with Cool Stuff. At the time, we were working with Cool Stuff Games. They were very helpful. We went to their headquarters, and we ran it. They treated us well. It was really cool. The 30-hour marathon was a lot of fun. where we did things. We were still having trouble streaming live. Streaming live was much, much harder in 2018 than it is today. You had to have special equipment to use good cameras, and it was really, really a thing going on there. But that was a fun one. Roy Canada showed up for that one of our contributors, little knowing that he would be more involved as time went by. Also during this time, we started the Facebook group. Up to this point, we were using Board Game Geek forums as our forums, which were fine. At that time, I didn't have as much control over those forums. So I wanted something where I did have complete control. We started our Facebook group, and we actually have several Facebook groups now. But I have to say, every time I mention Facebook, there's people, I hate Facebook, people say, and that's fine. But I'm very happy and proud of our Facebook group. I really like it. It's a good group of people. We are super strict moderating it. And there's been dust-ups in there before, because there's always going to be dust-ups and things. But we try to crack down on those pretty hard. And it is a group, like, let's say you hate Facebook. I still think you might like the Dice Tower Facebook group. And I've really enjoyed that over the years. So in 2017, we had added Mandy and Suzanne to the podcast. That was not a smooth transition. I'll take the blame for that in many ways, because I kind of rolled it out. I don't know what I was thinking. Hey, we need some female voices on the Dice Tower. Here we have two contributors, Mandy and Suzanne. I actually introduced them to each other, basically. They were both doing different things. I brought up the idea. I said, let's make them a full podcast host, but let's give them complete freedom. That way no one will say, Tom is telling them what to do. Do what you want, and they're going to take over every other one. We announced this in 2017, and it went over. So there was a lot of reasons, like I said. One was just the way I announced it and everything. People were like, oh, we're getting less of you. Why don't you add more of them? But I also needed to kind of, doing it, the podcast every week was really wearing on me. So now we were doing it every other week. So, and then the other part was that Mandy and Suzanne were so different than we were. This is something I've learned over the past 5 years, that when you bring in new voices, and we bring in new voices here at the Dice Tower all the time, but when you bring in new voices, this is, people don't necessarily want to transition that. Sometimes they can learn to like new voices, but there's different audiences. And so when you add something new that's different, don't be surprised when it doesn't appeal to people. Now, people are opposed to change, and I get that. But Mandy and Suzanne just have a very different style than me and Eric did. And so it was as if the podcast was two different podcasts going on each week. But I was like, all right, well, we made the change. We're sticking with it. But I also wanted to do something else with Eric. So we started Dice Tower Tonight, which was like a game show we did on Wednesday nights. Now, I found that doing stuff at night for me, as the years went by, I found that doing stuff at night is a little tiring, can be exhausting. And so as the somewhere in 2018, 2019, I transitioned out and Crystal came in. We were together at first, but then Crystal and Eric took over Dice Tower Tonight. I still like the concept of the game show, and we are going to be bringing that back to some degree this year. But it was another way for me to spend some time with Eric. Then we went to Gamma. And oh my word, folks, I forgot in 2018 how many conventions we went to. So many conventions. This one was a good one, though. This was the first year we went to Gamma in Reno. And we didn't know how that was going to work out, because in prior years, Gamma had given us a special room. Here we just had a suite in the hotel, and it worked amazing. It really did work well. Oddly enough, this is the last time, or we'll come back to that, but this is the last time we did that streaming and showing things off from Gamma. But me and some of the guys went there, and we streamed, and I did interviews and things like that. This is one of the first times we got to hang out with Corey, who's now running our Dice Tower News part of the website. And we had a good time there at Gamma, although there was still a little bit of awkwardness for some of the retailers because of the different videos I had made in 2017 about retailers. But I was repairing my relationship with Gamma and seeing where that would go. But that was a good time we had at Gamma. And like I said, I went to lots of different conventions. I went to a homeschool convention. I was like, hey, why don't I try to reach this market? So me and Melody went, and we ran a booth by ourselves, something we won't do again, but working with cool stuff, showing off different games like Onitama and the different games from Genius Games and so on like that. Uh, we went to a convention in Ohio, a Miami University convention, which when I first got the invite from them, I was like, well, I just drive up the street here. And they're like, no, 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 we're in Ohio. But we started going to these different things. But the one convention that really made the biggest difference was MeepleCon. Now, I've talked about MeepleCon. We went there. Tim Metvier invited me out. And he asked me, I think in 2017, he said, do you want to do Dice Tower West? And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. I went and said, hey, Cool Stuff, I'm kind of thinking about this. Cool Stuff said, you really should focus on one convention. I was like, all right, I will. And then I thought about it some more. Remember I said I had that idea if I wanted to grow. So I was like, Tim, I think I do want to do this. Let me think about it. So I went to Cool Stuff and I said, guys, I think we can do this and you'll be able to come. And Cool Stuff was very, very opposed to me starting Dice Tower West. I was really surprised. I had a big conference call with all the different people involved and everything. And it was very much, I said, hey, I'm looking at PAX, and PAX has PAX, and they have PAX East. They didn't have PAX Unplugged at the time. Well, they did. They started PAX Unplugged that year, actually. And I said, look at all the things that PAX is doing. I would like to do that. I want to start other Dice Tower conventions. You know, we got the cruise here that we're putting together, and we have Dice Tower West seems to be a natural thing, but they were very opposed to that. And I think the opposition to Dice Tower West cooled a lot of Cool Stuff working with us in general. Also, Cool Stuff at the time was transitioning to Quartermaster Logistics, which was a majority of what they did. So that relationship was never bad. It was never anything said, but it just started to cool a little bit. And I was like, you know what? We're going to do Dice Tower West. So we started making plans to do Dice Tower West. Now, that being said, we were also pushing Dice Tower Convention at the time. Dice Tower Convention was run by Patrick Havert and was owned, I found out, completely by Cool Stuff. Patrick had sold the convention to Cool Stuff at some point over the years. And I didn't know that because I didn't actually own any part of that convention. In fact, it wasn't even technically called Dice Tower Convention. I think it was called Orlando Gaming Convention. We were just calling it Dice Tower Convention as like a side thing. And I wanted to be involved with a lot of decision makings for Dice Tower Con, and I really wasn't able to do that. They came to me with a lot of things, and I set up things, but there were many, many decisions that were just not involved, and I got no money at all from the conventions. I was just excited to go to them, but the amount of work and stuff we were putting into them, I thought, well, maybe we should get a little bit out of this. But that was just some thoughts that were in my head. So while we were doing all this, I went to some other conventions. I went to Geekway to the West for the first and only time, but that was a great convention. And then a huge event. So I started the Dice Tower. I started doing reviews in 2002 with my very young daughter, Melody, was involved in them. And here in 2018, she graduated. Great. That's fantastic. I'm so proud. And she went to college later that year. And now we were down to 6 in the Vasel household. At this point in time, we're down to 4. But that was a really big deal for me as a father. I felt like I was an older person suddenly. I now had someone who had graduated high school and moved on. And so Melody leaving was also kind of a personal, she had always played games with me and everything. So I missed that. She's still, of all my kids, probably the one who likes playing games the most. But this was part of 2018. We went to UK Games Expo. That was a lot of fun. We went to Origins. So this was, I think, I'll have to check, when I get to 2019 as we're going through this. But this was one of the last big things we ever did at Origins. In fact, we had a big hanging sign that we bought. We bought signs from China. We found a place to get signs. We made we had a huge thing at Origins. We did interviews and back and forth, and the hanging sign whose cover was stolen by someone at Origins. I'll never know who, but I want my bag back. But we only used that sign that one time. Unfortunately, we couldn't afford to put it up at Gen Con and other cons. It's really expensive to hang those signs, by the way. But that was a really cool Origins. We just had a big time there. But we realized between Origins and Gamma, we're kind of tired of doing these interviews with publishers. Interviews with publishers is an interesting thing. And there's a reason you don't see many of them here in the Dice Tower anymore. One, everyone does them. You go to Origins, Gen Con, whatever, Essen, lots of people, hey, talk about this. And so there's just so much, there's noise out there. Secondly, they're almost always not really interviews. They're about, hey, let me talk about my new game for the entirety of the time. Thirdly, publishers and designers, there's exceptions, but for the most part, aren't particularly great on camera. And so we found that these were tons of work, tons of money going into this, but not a lot of people watching. So we decided to kind of pull back from that. And if you notice, Board Game Geek, who was also doing it, also pulled back from doing it because it's a lot of work for little reward. And I know that there will be someone in the comments going, I love that stuff, I miss it so much. But we have to kind of do what we think a lot of people are looking for, and it just wasn't there. Then we did the Dice Tower Con. 2018 was probably the most successful of all the Dice Tower Cons. 2019 was the last one, but 2018, we had this huge, this production team came in and did an audio and did a huge setup. We did a live Dice Tower Awards, which was a lot of fun. Chaz and Marty came in and did like a side thing where they were doing side streaming on the side and we were on the big stage. And again, this was where I was like, holy cow, we put so much effort. I brought in tons of people. We did so much work. And we just didn't get any money out of that. They gave us free hotel rooms and they gave us a per diem for food and such. But we felt like, wow, you know, this is Dice Tower Con, but it's not really our con. And so at least I say we, but this was a lot of thoughts that were coming into me. And a lot of people that I was talking to at the time from publishers and things were kind of shocked. They're like, you don't own any of the con? I was like, no, I own none of it, you know? And so that kind of came to me. And so after the con was over, I had a meeting with Cool Stuff and I said, hey, you know, I want to be more involved and stuff. And Cool Stuff said, you know what? We're just going to end it. We're going to make 2019 the last year, and then we're just going to end it. And I said, oh, okay. Well, if you're going to end it, can I start my own convention? I'm going to just restart it. I'll call it Dice Tower East just to differentiate so that, you know, that there's no confusion. But we're going to start up our own con. And Cool Stuff said yes, but they asked me to delay telling anybody about it and announcing it, which in retrospect for me was a humongous mistake because I knew about this in like November of 2018 and we didn't make the announcement about it till post Dice Tower 2019 and a lot of people involved didn't find out till like a month before the con. And it wasn't, you know, looking back in retrospect, I would have liked to have told people it wasn't my place, it wasn't my con, so I couldn't make that announcement, right? But that led to some hard feelings and a lot of people's things, and I did not mean it to be so, but that's just where that ended up. We also went to other cons. This year we went to Iceland, which was a lot of fun. Midgard, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to in my life, me and Z, and that was fantastic. We went to Essen and had a great time. We started, you know, this was starting to become a continual thing. We decided not to record our show there for the first time. We had normally record our show. We got so much negative feedback on doing that. And that leads me to some of the stuff we were doing in the studio. So in the studio, we were recording a lot of videos and we were starting to do live things. But live stuff was a real pain in the neck. We had this $8,000 piece of machinery that we needed to stream live. Now you download a piece of software and there's little connection things that cost like $100 that you can connect and the HDMIs now work on your cameras. It's fantastic. But, you know, our streaming wasn't that good. We didn't have great connections and we always got constant complaints about streaming, but I was liking it a lot. I liked the idea of streaming. I also liked the idea of live playthroughs. I had gotten weary of doing Kickstarter previews and I had stopped them years before. Mark Street was still doing them on our channel. But I thought, what if we could play a game live for publishers? So we did several over the course of this year. We did them for free. We're just like, hey, we'll play games live. We did some, we'll play against the internet stuff. And we'd already been doing our live 24-hour streams and things. But I thought, hey, I want to do more of this. I want to add some of the silliness. Our Cinco Linko thing, we pre-recorded that, but that went up this year. And I thought, this kind of stuff would be fun to do. And so I had a meeting with everybody. I was like, we're going to, you know what? I'm going to be pushing in the future for the Dice Tower. I want to make live stuff a bigger deal. So next year, I want to really push live stuff. We're going to have weekly shows that are live, and we're going to, you know, just really push the live stuff. We had done the top 100 list together. We had done it together for the first time in 2017. Very popular. So now we're doing it together in 2018. But the 10 through 1, we did live, and people loved that again. And I was like, man. So I said, we're going to just really push to live. And Derek's like, was very quiet in the meeting. And I thought, well, I know, Derek, you like live stuff. And he's like, I do. Now I kind of wish I was staying. And I was like, wait, why? And he had decided that he wanted to move back to Colorado, different reasons, family and stuff. And I was like, all right. So now it's time to find a new video editor again. So I put out the call, applications came in, and Roy Canaday, who I had known because he was on the different shows on the Dice Tower and did some reviews for us. I talked to him. He was so enthusiastic. The enthusiasm was through the roof. So he was the person that I hired. So in all this time, I'd be like, all right, so we're moving onward. Another thing I had decided earlier in the year was I was like, I want to try the idea of doing my own little mini convention. The Dice Tower Retreat was my idea. I said, who's interested? I went to a hotel. I asked them, I thought, I would get 70 people, and we had like 150 people interested. And I was like, oh my. So I decided, hey, we're going to run 2 retreats back to back, 2 weeks back to back at this little hotel. Kenny, who was doing all my logistics and everything else, was out of the country when I decided to do this. So I made some pretty not good contracts. I lost money on those first 2 retreats for sure. But they were amazing. In a little hotel, we were cramped, barely enough room. We brought in a library, which I had just started putting the library of games together to utilize for this retreat. I had my own personal collection, but I had decided at this point that I was going to be taking Dice Tower East on. So I had started slowly building up the library, but it was nothing compared to what it was now. I was also bringing these games onto the cruise ship for Dice Tower Cruise, which was going to happen in 2019. But Dice Tower Retreat was just a fantastic time. I met so many great friends there, some of the best people I've ever met in the Dice Tower there, and that's been going strong to this day. But so we were doing that, and then also, like I said, PAX Unplugged started this year. So we went to PAX Unplugged. Maybe it was at the start of the year before. It doesn't matter. We went there. We met up with Roy. It was a great time as we were doing PAX Unplugged, and we did stuff there. And the channel was starting to shift that direction. Also, over the course of this year, Throat Punch Launch, or Token Punch Launch, whatever the name was at that time, and Board Game Blender, I said, let's end those 2 shows, because we have 3 shows that are basically the same, Board Game Breakfast, and let's combine and make just one show, Board Game Breakfast, going forward, kind of bringing all our contributors together. All right. Well, let's hope everything goes well for 2019. We got a Kickstarter. Dice Tower Con will be the last one of that. We knew that at the time. Dice Tower Cruise is coming into swing here. I think it was the second Dice Tower Cruise in 2019. Maybe, I don't know. And we're going to try to do more live stuff. Well, how's that all going to work out? I'll tell you in our next video. So that's it for 2018. A lot of different things going on. And this has been History of the Dice Tower. I'm Tom Vasel. We'll see you next time.